And so these are our session objectives. So by the end of this session, we should all be able to apply key principles to design and deliver impactful training sessions. We should also utilize proven management techniques in both in-person and virtual environments. And then we should be able to address common challenges to ensure learners remain motivated and focused during our training sessions. Think about a training session that we've all attended before that was engaging and effective. And I'm asking, what made it memorable? Can you write down one key element that stood out for you during that training? So let's ask ourselves this question: why training delivery matters? Why training delivery matters? And I would say training is more than sharing information. It's about transforming knowledge into action. A well-delivered session boosts learner engagement, retention, and application of skill. And the key insight here is that engaging training ensures long-term impact rather than short-term memorization. And so if you should deliver a training and then it is not engaging, but then it's just a short-term training and you would want people just to come and then gather knowledge and go away. You would not have a long-term impact. Rather, you would have a short-term impact, which would only be full of memorization. And then after a brief period, you would ask participants about what they learned, or the organization will be expecting to see changes in the participants' behavior or work attitudes or technical skills, and nothing will be felt. So let's talk about some four core training strategies for success. The first one is preparation. And I used to have a boss who would say, prior proper planning meets good preparation and ensures engagement. And so I would say that preparation is very, very important, is an important strategy for a successful training. And under preparation, you are saying you should research needs and tailor your content. I've just made them very short, but I think they really speak to what we are talking about. And then when we look at engagement also, I'm saying we should use stories, examples, discussions, and activities. So I've just come up with some activities here, the think, pair, share, personal reflections, the games, etc. And then when it comes to delivery, speak clearly and adapt to reactions, the impact, measure understanding via quizzes, feedback, performance, and business results. Now let's look. There's this science. You see, training is an art, but then it's a science also. HR is an art and then it's a science. And so we are saying that we want to know techniques to drive engagement. How are you going to drive engagement when you are meeting with a group, when you are training people, either virtually, either in person, or what have you? How are you going to drive engagement? So we are saying capturing and sustaining attention is key to effective learning. So the techniques to drive engagement, you should ask open-ended questions. And when you ask open-ended questions, it encourages discussion and critical thinking. As you use storytelling, and the research shows that stories are 22 times more memorable than facts alone. You should add movement. And studies indicate that active learning increases retention by 30 to 50%. So this is a study by Harvard University. And beneath it, I have a famous quote by Benjamin Franklin. He says, tell me and I forget, teach me and I may remember, involve me and I learn. And so we'd see that involvement or engagement is one of the key things that we need in order for our training to be able to succeed, or in order for us to deliver good training. I once heard a story and during a training session, and I've kept that story in mind. It's been more than 6 years, but I still have that story in mind, and it really reflects any time I'm going to organize the training. And so storytelling, asking questions, and then adding movements is some of the key things that we need to use as techniques to drive engagement. Now let's look at virtual versus in-person training techniques. So if you're having an in-person training, you should use eye contact, gestures, and movement. And by doing so, you command attention and then you maintain the energy of the group. You should encourage small group discussions and role playing, and this would help reinforce learning through participation. And you should incorporate real world examples. And we are saying that learners retain concepts better when they relate to their experiences. And for virtual training, we are saying you should at all times keep slides visually engaging and interactive, use polls, breakout rooms, and chat discussions to maintain attention. You should keep sessions shorter, that is, aim for 20 to 30-minute blocks to avoid screen fatigue. And you should engage with your voice and visuals. You should use a dynamic tone, camera presence, and well-paced slides to keep learners connected. And so these are key things that we need to look at when we are either having a virtual session or an in-person training session. Now let's ask this: how can I make my training memorable? How can I make my training sink so deep into the minds of participants that once they leave the training venue and go back to either their homes, their offices, their organizations, or they go back to report, how will they be able to really retain whatever has been, or whatever information has been passed on, whatever skill they have learned during the training? So we are saying that making training memorable, there are some 4 tips that we can use to make our trainings memorable. And I'm saying that learners retain stories, experiences, and interactive sessions better than facts. And so to have a memorable training, you should keep your session brief, 10 to 15 minutes. Then you engage your learners. You should use case studies, and case studies show real-world application. You should include role play, and with role play, it makes the concepts that you are trying to introduce participants to more relatable. And then you should encourage reflection. Short debriefs enhances retention. So let's look at you as the trainer. So we've been looking at the science now, memorable training, techniques for virtual and in-person, the science of engagement. Now let's come to the trainer itself, or the trainer. And we are saying that the way you deliver matters just as much as what you deliver. So to really, really deliver as a trainer, you need vocal variety. You should be able to change your tone, pace, and volume for emphasis. Your body language, you should at all times maintain eye contact, use open gestures, and avoid distractions like pacing. And then, if you are pacing, also don't rush. Pause for emphasis, and then also interactions. So you see the gentleman in the picture, how he's held firmly to the mic and then he's using the gestures. And then you could even tell from the picture that the voice will be very, very audible. And then he would be doing the change of tone. And even just as I am speaking, there are times I would raise my voice. There are times I would slow them down. There are times I would change the variety of my voice. All this is in a bid to capture my audience attention and then to make them be with me throughout the training. Now, just as everything is so well and things go well at all times, we are all bound to face some challenges. And so every trainer faces obstacles. And how you handle them defines your success. And so I've put in some common challenges and solutions. These are just a few, but they are enormous, and you could research on the internet for more. Disruptions. So to avoid disruptions, you should at all times set ground rules at the beginning and redirect focus when needed. And so for trainings that I organize, sometimes I would ask the participants themselves to elect one person to lead them to set the ground rules. And at the end of every day, we evaluate the ground rules and see the ones we were able to work on very well and the ones that didn't go well. And then we all reflect and reiterate that the next day or during our next meeting, we'll do much more better to be able to observe those ground rules. And then once there is low engagement, you need to switch to interactive methods like group discussions or quick calls. And so technical issues. So always have a backup plan, such as offline materials or alternative activities. And so every trainer, once you are going into the training, if you have your session guide or your training slides, it's very, very important that you print them aside your flip chart and all other materials you get. Print your training plan or your session guide, and then have your PowerPoint and then your projectors ready. You may not know when there will be power outages, or sometimes you would even go into locations where you will not even get access to electricity to run your training, but then training must still be run. And so at all times, we should always have a backup plan once we are going into a training session. And let me add this, with the backup plan also, it can be that you, the facilitator, should have another person with you who is a backup once anything happens in the training venue. And this is very, very important, and it is very, very key to ensure continuity. Now let's come a bit into the science. Engaging training, if you really want to captivate your learners and then deliver training very well, you need to apply certain key training frameworks. And the first one we'll talk about is the experiential learning. And I know most of us do run training for adult learners. I believe adult learners will always want to build on their experiences. And so when you take a look at the concrete experience, it is like you are doing or you have an experience already. And then for reflective observation, you are reviewing or reflecting on that experience. And then for active concluding or learning from that experience. And then the abstract, you are planning or you are trying out, please have in mind that what you are going to teach them, it can be science, it can be anything. In college, we were told nobody is a tabula rasa. And so everyone comes into training with a wealth and experience of knowledge. So we are saying that for experiential learning, we are saying a training practices a skill, reflects on the outcome, refines the approach, and applies it again. Now let's look at the ADDIE model for training design. And so there are some stages, and the first stage is the analysis. So the analysis basically involves identifying training needs, and then the design involves how you structure the content and activities. When it comes to development, you are creating the training materials. And then when it comes to implementation, you deliver the training. And then for evaluation, you assess the effectiveness and then improve. So evaluation is basically to assess effectiveness and improve. So this is the ADDIE model. You could learn more about this when you visit shrm.org, and then even just go wide on the internet to read more. And I believe most organizations use the ADDIE model for their trainings, and most trainers also do so. Now let's look at the Bloom's taxonomy. The Bloom's taxonomy. So Bloom's taxonomy, it categorizes learning objectives. And so before you start your training, before you start planning for your training, you need to look at how you are going to set your objectives for the training. Remember, everything you do at the planning stage would result in successful training. And so, with the Bloom's taxonomy, we are looking at the knowledge, comprehension, application, analysis, synthesis, and evaluation. And so, if you are going to use the Bloom's taxonomy, it is going to help you to categorize the objectives that you are going to set for your training session. And then also it would help you to evaluate at the end whether there has been learning, whether there has been behavior change, whether people are able to apply the knowledge and all that. So let me quickly run through the stages of the Bloom's taxonomy. So when we talk about knowledge, it's just the ability to recall facts and basic concepts. And so with knowledge, you would see objectives coming in as define, list, and name. Now, comprehension means, oh, you have understood the meaning and you can interpret your understanding to a second party or to a group. And with that, you would have objectives coming in the form of, at the end of the session, you should be able to summarize, you should be able to explain. Now, from comprehension, then you would perceive that, okay, once you are able to recall, once you are able to understand and interpret, then you should be able to apply. So then application comes in. And so with application, we use information in new situations. And so you would see objectives coming in as at the end of the session, participants will be able to demonstrate, participants will be able to apply. Then we talk of analysis. Now, analysis is just to break information into parts and examine the relationship between them. And so let's say if you are having a training session and you want participants to compare or to differentiate, then on the Bloom analysis or on the Bloom's taxonomy, you are trying to look at what analysis. Now, once you are able to differentiate and do all that, then you should be able to combine the elements to create something new, and that is the synthesis. And so you will see at the end of the session, participants should be able to design a simple training framework for adult learners who are in the blue collar sector. And so this is what you are going to use the synthesis to evaluate that. Then at the end, we have evaluation. So for evaluation, we believe that at that stage, trainers would want learners to make judgments and justify their decisions. So they need to critique, they need to defend. And here is a tip. I'm saying that you should mix different models depending on your audience, the content, and training goals for maximum impact. And so you should mix them. You should have analysis questions coming in. You should have application questions coming in. You should have comprehension questions. You should have knowledge questions. And you should have evaluation questions, all within your training. And so your questions that you are going to ask should be based on the objectives that you set for your training. Now, once you start something, there is a goal. And so we have inputs, we have a process, and then we have outcome. So your process is the training, your input is your preparation, and your outcome should be the evaluation. What do we want to see at the end of the day? And it's quite interesting that trainers will come for training and the questions they ask themselves first is, what is in it for me? It means they've even started looking at the outcome. And so as trainers, we need to evaluate the trainings we organize. And so we are saying that, why do we need to evaluate our training? One is to ensure that the training meets its objectives and drives real impact. And then the training would identify, so we are saying it identifies areas for improvement and enhances future sessions. And then it provides measurable feedback on learner progress and training effectiveness. And so we would want to talk about one training evaluation framework, which most organizations are using now, and there are more coming up. And so I would advise you do more research on that. And so one is the Kirkpatrick model of evaluation. And so if you would want to evaluate your training, you would want to first look at the reaction. How did participants feel about the training? So that's the first level, the reaction. So if you should look at the picture, the reaction shows emojis. So for me, at times when I organize training, I ask participants to just pick a sticky note and use an emoji to describe their feeling after they've gone through the training. And by then, you would want to gauge the reaction of participants. Some would want to use feedback forms, some would want to use participant discussion. And an example is you could ask the question, did you find the session engaging and relevant? And we must not wait as trainers, we must not wait till the end of the training before we ask questions on reactions. Because once you are getting signals or feedback on reaction, even as the training is going on, it will help you to quickly adjust or bring in something new that will boost or that will change the atmosphere. And so what I do is normally when I'm running trainings or there's a training sessions for volunteers and all that, when it is time for a group activity or when it is time for just a small break, 2 minutes break, I try to get close to someone and ask, how's the session going so far? Because one, I want to gauge the reaction. And so the second level is learning. What knowledge or skills did participants gain? And to evaluate that, we'll need to use quizzes, tests, or skills demonstrations. And most organizations, or most of us on the call, we are so much aligned to the pre and post assessments that we use to measure learning progress. And on level 3, we talk about behavior. So are participants applying what they learned? So observe on the job performance or conduct follow-up service. And an example is track how often employees use new skill post-training. So back in LMI, we had a customer service session and we ran a training for them. And we had to go back and really get information from on the job performance that has been done, from 360-degree feedback that has been done within the period that we are looking at. So I would normally give it a 2-month or a 3-month period or window just to know that whether participants are really applying what they learned. And as trainers, we shouldn't be too stern here and begin to look out for behavior change within 1 month. Sometimes they really, really take a bit of a time. It could take a whole year. It could take a whole year for you to observe changing behavior. And the fourth level is results. So the result is what impact did the training have on the organization? And so for you to do that, you need to analyze business results, you need to check productivity, you need to look out for performance improvement. And an example is increased efficiency, there's reduction in errors or improved team collaboration. And this is a tip I'm giving out. At all times, we should combine qualitative feedback with quantitative data for a comprehensive evaluation. And so at the end of your training, don't say, oh, I want to do a qualitative feedback, so I just need a survey, I need an interview. Everything should be backed with data. And that is where the quantitative feedback also comes in. We need to balance the two to be able to report very well to organizations that we are in. Remember, organizations will always want to pull out money for training, but then they come back to the training department and ask, we've given you so much, we are not seeing anything. So as trainers, we need to show to our organizations that this is what we had, this is the training we run, this is the impact, this is the change in behavior, and this is the results. So I would ask one question. That's my final reflection. I would ask that what one strategy you apply in your next training session, and then how will you measure its success, and then what feedback mechanisms will you use to improve future sessions?